welcome to Tap That MTG, the show where we tell you everything we know about Magic the Gathering that is sometimes wrong, but fun to talk about. I'm Lesley.
And I'm Shawna.
And today we are bringing you another deep dive into one of the Challenger decks that is coming out this April. This one is Cavalcade Charge, it's called. So what's a Challenger deck?
Well, the Challenger decks are pre-made decks from Wizards. They cover some of the most popular.
It's hard to explain.
Yeah, it is. They cover the most popular. Well, no, some of the most popular decks that are currently being played in Standard in the Pro Tour. So not every card in there is Pro, but for the most part, these are really, really strong decks. They're great decks for a person who wants to take their game up another level.
Level up.
Yes.
Ding!
So they're very very fun to play, and they have sideboards built in, so you're ready to go with that. So our videos are actually covering how these decks are supposed to work and then how you would sideboard those in. So they don't require a lot of tweaking, but we're going to help you figure out how to play these darn things.
Hopefully we'll give you what you need to sit down and play them.
Yeah.
So stats-wise, this deck has a fairly low mana curve. There's 21 land, which is a decent amount of land because it is a monocolor. There's 18 cards with 1 mana cost, 12 with 2 mana cost, 16 with 3 mana cost, and only 7 with 4. There is one lowly 6 mana cost card. So really, it's really fast and quick to play, and hopefully that will be...
Hopefully you kill them fast.
Yeah, that's the goal, because if you don't have them dead within the first 6 turns, you're probably going to lose. Just saying.
We'll explain why in a minute. So color-wise, this is all red. It's 100% red. There is nothing else in there, just red cards.
Yep.
Creatures and stuff. So there are 27 creatures. Lots of these little guys.
Very creature heavy.
And there is 1 artifact. We'll tell you what that is when we get in there.
There should be more than 1.
There should be more than 1. But there's only 1. And 7 instances, 7 sorceries, 7 enchantments.
Lucky number 7.
And there's 5 planeswalker cards in there. What could they possibly be, I wonder?
What could they possibly be? I know what they are.
We're going to get into that.
We're going to tell you. But first, this deck. How do you play it? What's it do? We alluded to it a little bit. Basically, you're going to want to... The main thing in this deck is the enchantment, which is Cavalcade for Calamity. You're going to want to get that out on the battlefield, and it does 1 damage to target player for every creature that's a 1/1 that's attacking. So it has a lot of little tiny guys that you attack with, and then you do extra damage. So if you get that out, and then that with a combination of Torbrand, which does extra damage for if it's a red source. If you get Torbrand and Cavalcade and the Chandra Planeswalker out, you are set.
Pretty much.
Those are kind of the 3 key that I would say. And then other than that, the way you're going to play this is you're just going to be really, really fast. You're going to swing in with everything that you possibly can. If all of a sudden you find yourself stalled out, you can't swing in without losing all your guys, that's when it's like, don't give up. Don't quit. Don't just because if you can get your Torbrand out, suddenly you can start swinging again because they're more reluctant to attack or block something that can do 3 damage rather than just 1 damage. So there's also ways to buff up your guys as they swing, which we'll talk about as we go. So let's get into it. What is in this deck for Planeswalkers?
The very important planeswalker that's in here is little Chandra, Acolyte of Flame. There's 3 of them in there, and her biggest job is to make little buddies, as she calls them on Arena. She makes these 2 little 1/1s that have haste, and you swing with them, and then they die at the end of their turn. So you're just swinging with those every turn. Pretty much. And
it doesn't matter if they die. And in fact, it doesn't matter if any of these die, especially these. if you
Yeah,
have
anyway.
if you have Cavalcade out,
Yeah.
because they get some damage in anyways, and they're gonna die anyway. So
It's the main purpose of her.
yeah. As
All
far
right.
as creatures, there are 4 Bone Crusher Giants. You are going to probably use this mostly as 2 damage to kill something that they have out. It is only 2 damage, so you do have to choose wisely. Don't just kill the first thing that they have on the battlefield.
Yes.
Think about it first. But then you can send it on an adventure after you've done 2 damage. I would always, 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 always send it on an adventure. Even if you have to do 2 damage to their face before sending like it on an adventure. Because there are some times where they don't have anything out on the battlefield, or you can't kill something of theirs. That's fine. Just do it to their face so that you get that 2 extra damage in. And then put Bone Crusher Giant on the battlefield. It's only 3 mana after that, so.
It is an instant, so it's better for you to hold it as long as
Yes.
you can and really wait for a good target.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's pretty important. You don't have a lot of removal in this deck, and so it's pretty important to use its removal.
Yeah.
The next thing we have 4 copies of is our friend, little Fervent Champion. He is just a little 1/1 that gets in there with First Strike and Haste, and he buffs up other knights, which is usually himself. He buffs himself up. When there's 2 of them out there, that's really strong when you can get both of them out there.
His twin brother.
Yes, and something that I always forget about is that equip abilities that target this champion cost 3 less to activate, which is really important when we get to another card that we're going to show you here in a few minutes. So,
The Embercleave. So Runaway Steamkin, there's 4 copies of this. So this is an interesting one in this deck because it is a 1/1 when it comes out, but it does get bigger. So you can't capitalize on the Cavalcade most of the time with this card. But if it manages to stay on the battlefield, because it is a target as soon as it's out there, you can get more mana to cast those things that you want because there is only 21 land in this deck. So sometimes you do have trouble getting the land that you need. So this helps with that a little bit, or gives you that extra little bit so that you can you swing in with a 4/4 and then play some spells on your second main phase with the mana that you have there. So yeah, I'm always of 2 minds with this one because sometimes it's just not a 1/1 when you need it to be a 1/1. But.
Exactly. And then there are 4 copies of Torbrand, and you can only have one of him out at a time, but it's such an important part of this deck because it gives everything 2 more damage points. So anything that your Bone Crusher Giant, if you're doing 2 damage with it, that's 2 more.
4 damage, yeah.
Right? So that is a really, really important card to have in there, and that's why there's 4 of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because legendaries, you typically only want to have 3 of any legendary in your deck just because you don't want to get stuck with them in your hand. But because Torbrand is so key to this deck, there is 4, and I think you need 4.
And as soon as the other person sees it out there, he's got a target on his back, for sure.
Yeah,
They're not going to let you keep it.
No,
If they have a way to
remove it.
they're going to get rid of it.
So Rimrock Knight is a fun little knight. He's great. We talked about buffing up. So this one allows you to like +2/+0. So again, you're almost always going to use the adventure if you can before you put him out. Every once in a while you just need something on the battlefield. But if you need to play him for his creature before the instant, you're probably losing at that point. So
Yep. He can't block for you anyways, so he is supposed to be aggressive.
Yeah.
And that's an instant, so make sure you use it in combat to use that +2/+1 and get rid of put it onto your Fervent Champion. Is the best place to put it. Scorch Spitter is a little 1/1 nasty little thing that whenever it attacks, it also does 1 damage. So when Torbrand's out, it's doing a lot of damage just by itself. It's a very annoying little guy.
Yeah.
I like to get rid of him a lot when I'm playing against him.
Well, and the nice thing about a lot of your stuff is that they have targets on their back right off the bat, so that people have to choose, what do I do? Unless they time wipe you or Deafening Clary on you, like we've talked about in other videos. And then all of a sudden you're behind. So that is kind of one of the downfalls of this deck. Tin Street Dodger is haste, which is super important and super fun with this deck. You can also pay and it can't be blocked. So that way you can still attack, not fear that it's going to die. If you get, there's only 3, I would probably say put 4 in this, because if you can get them all out on the battlefield and they stay on the battlefield, then you can just keep swinging in, especially if you get the Cavalcade out.
Yeah, it's unblockable.
Yeah.
So a really important card in this deck for card draw, because red always runs out of cards, is the Sorcery Light Up the Stage. So this one, you rarely ever play it for its full price of 2 in a red. You usually pay it for its spectacle cost. You've done damage, and then you play it and find out what cards you can get in your second main phase. So that's usually how you do it with this one. So there's 4 copies of that, because that's that card draw that you need for red.
Artifacts. So this is the artifact we were talking about. You might want more. It is a 6 mana cost, but it does cost 1 less for each attacking creature you control, and it gives an attacking creature +1/+1 in double strike and trample. So that can be a game changer, especially if you put it on something like your Fervent Champion. Remember, it costs 3 less to equip to. Now this, when it comes out, it automatically equips, but if that creature dies, then you'll need to re-equip it. So you can put it on Fervent Champion, who already has, for free, who already has first strike, but it's the trample that will help with that, and the double strike instead, so it hits again. But if you think back to like the Rimrock Knight that we talked about, adding that +2/+0. Now you add that double strike, that's 4 damage, that's trample. Do that a couple times, and suddenly this is pretty good. So yeah, especially with Torbran on there. So like really, I would probably put at least 2 in there.
And then the enchantment is pretty much the only enchantment that you need. It's Cavalcade of Calamity for 1 in a red, and it is what we talked about throughout this deck. It's the key win condition, and if you can have more than 1 out at a time, even better.
Oh yes.
So that's one that you do want to have multiple copies of if you can.
Oh, it's so great.
So there are
3
4
of them
copies
out.
in your deck.
Usually if you put 3 of them out, people quit.
Get it. With 2, I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So land-wise, what can you do? It's not really that important. It does have 3 Castle Embereth, which is a decent number for Castle Embereth, which gives your creatures +1/+0, which this is actually really important. So Cavalcade for Calamity only procs, it only triggers, to use the right word, if you're attacking with a creature that is +1/+1, or that is a 1/1.
Power, well, it can be toughness of whatever.
Toughness of whatever.
Power of
1. So if you buff up your creature before you attack, then it will not proc the Cavalcade of Calamity. So it is super important to attack first.
Declare your attackers, yes. Yeah.
Declare your attackers. Yep. And then before combat damage or after blockers, you could do it before blockers, after blockers, whatever. After Cavalcade of Calamity goes off, triggers, all those things kind of go on the stack, then you can use this to buff up as many times as you want, have mana for.
Yeah.
So that timing-wise, use
Actually,
this.
I think you can only do once, because you have to tap this.
Right, yeah, you can only, but you might have, there's 3 in here.
So. Oh yeah, you might have more than 1.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so then you can just give everything +1/+0, which is great.
Alrighty. Then the sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
For this one is fairly simple. It has 3 experimental frenzies, which is definitely an experiment, because what you have to do when you play this card is you don't get to play anything out of your hand. So, but you get to play whatever you want off the top of your deck.
You have to pay for it.
You have to pay for it, of course. But yeah, and so you're taking a chance of just being able to play a whole bunch of spells.
Yeah, sometimes it works. I would say
so when we
50% of the time it doesn't.
When we do sideboard?
Well, I don't love that spell, so I probably would never sideboard it in. I wouldn't put this in my sideboard if I was building my own deck, but when would you put it in?
Maybe if you're going against like a really slow
I know a reason.
What?
Someone keeps making you discard your cards.
Oh, there you go.
And you don't have hand.
There you go.
Or you keep
That's a
running
really
out
good
of
point.
cards
So
and you
black,
don't have stuff
going against
in your
black,
hand.
that's
Or
discarding.
black red.
Mm-hmm.
That
True.
Craxos makes you
Yeah,
discard.
that's
So
true.
you put experimental
She's
frenzy.
smart. That's why I hang out with her.
Trying to think of it. So you put an experimental frenzy down, and all of a sudden now you play off the top of your deck instead of trying to keep cards in your hand. I would also maybe, if I'm finding that I can't, just it's a good little keeps cards in your hand. Makes your library your deck. So it's got 4 shocks.
Mm-hmm. Simple.
You need removal.
Yep.
Sideboard it in.
You're playing against another red deck, maybe?
Yeah.
Be a good time to use that. When would you use to bolt?
Well, what is it?
It is the Rakish Instigator. He is trouble. He makes little devils all over the place that when they die, they do 1 damage. But his main purpose is when you're going against those life gain decks.
Yeah.
Red decks are terrible against life gain decks, except when he's out because your opponents can't gain life. So that is awesome. He says, nope. And I'm just going to keep pinging you. So he's great to bring him in if you're going against a life gain, a Johnny Pridemate or something like that deck.
There's also 3 Satyr's Cunning, which ultimately gets you a bunch of little 1/1s. You can't block with them, so it doesn't matter. You just want to be able to swing with them. And it has escape, so you can keep doing that. So if you're finding that they keep board wiping you and you can't get your creatures out on the battlefield fast enough, this gives you your creatures faster. So I would sideboard in if they have a lot of board wipes.
And Slaying Fire deals 3 damage to any target. So this is that removal that you need for going against another red deck or anything with creatures. And if you use, well, what you are going to use 3 red mana to do it, it's 4 damage instead. So it's a removal that you might need. That and the shock. So if you're going against creature decks, that's what you would want to do.
So tweaks in your sideboard, I might throw in Lava Coil.
Right.
Because it exiles a creature instead and it does 4 damage. And there is a lot of like big stompy stuff. As we talked about, if you don't win by turn 6, then all of a sudden you're trying to not lose. So that doesn't mean you can't win, but once you get kind of to that stage, all of a sudden it becomes harder to win the game. So anyways, Lava Coil, I would say.
I was humming and hawing about Annex in this deck.
Yeah.
Because using the Cavalcade, it's a little bit different kind of deck.
Yeah,
But
it doesn't really fit
Annex
with that.
does make little 1/1s when creatures die, so it might be okay in there. It would be something to try.
Yeah.
But
So this deck, opinions-wise, we might as well talk about opinions. I think this deck is probably the easiest one for you to pick up and play and learn if you're a relatively new player. If you're a more seasoned player, you can probably make a better red deck wins. Some of the devotion stuff works a lot better for winning with red deck wins right now. This one doesn't win as much as some of those decks do. As at least in my experience. So some of you may have other experiences, and awesome. If you're winning with it, then keep doing whatever you're doing. The other thing I would probably add in this, and I would have to really look at my creatures to decide which ones I wanted to take out, but Chandra Spitfire. I think I don't understand why Chandra Spitfire is not actually in this deck, because it's a 1/3 flyer. When it swings in, it's gonna make Cavalcade of Calamity trigger, and then it triggers. Cavalcade of Calamity does damage, and then that triggers Chandra Spitfire, which then buffs her up. If you have 4 of them out, and all of a sudden you have a flyer that can do 20 damage, all in one blow, and the game is over. So if you have Cavalcade out and Chandra Spitfire, people will be really mad if they can't remove Chandra Spitfire. I would put 4 in this deck for sure.
yeah, and it's not a difficult card to get.
Yeah.
So it's not expensive.
Yeah, I might even take the Rim Rocks out because they're just 3/1s that you have to swing with, I mean, they have the buff up, but you have the castle to do that. So I don't know. I would probably take the Rim Rocks out and put in Chandra Spitfires.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We are, of course, available on YouTube and anywhere that you can find podcasts. So wherever your favorite is, that's where you'll find us. You can feel free to shout out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We try our hardest to get back to you if we can. So that's it for this week. Hopefully we'll see you next week. And in the meantime, tap those magic cards and have fun doing it.
Bye, guys.